So, as I mentioned in the intro, Jonathan Pye did an excellent video called The Death of Discourse. So I think to kick this off, we'll just play a little clip of that now.
We appear to have entered a new era of political violence, perhaps from both sides, where there is no place for civil discourse and robust argument, but where guns and violence and threats of violence settle the score instead. How the pendulum has swung. It's been a long time coming, but after over a decade of liberal elites' barely concealed hatred for those who don't vote the way we want them to, a decade of eye-wateringly puritanical pearl-clutching and thought crime and cloyingly well-meaning but patronising lectures about identity, a society where opinions are policed, where unsavoury jokes became arrestable offences, the left washed their hands of free speech, gladly handing it to the right, who are now using it as a stick to beat us with, using it to silence everyone on the left by branding us all terrorists. The left have emboldened a right that mops up those left behind and who stray from the very narrow path that is the progressive liberal consensus.
Full of gags, as ever. That is full of just pinging one-liners. It's like Michael McIntyre.
Well, you know what was funny about that video is that among the kind of people either accusing you of being a fascist or a communist, there was quite a lot of Americans going, seriously, is this what counts for journalism in your country?
Well, I'm afraid it does. I mean, you'd be amazed the amount of followers that I'm just like, he speaks more truth than any journalist. Like, I really don't. Or pie for PM, get that a lot. Can you fucking imagine?
I think this was a really good video. I think it covered a lot of ground and it had sort of criticisms for left and right, but just sort of unpack your main thinking there. One of the sentences that stood out for me was about the woke zombies. I thought that's a great bit of phrasing.
Yeah. I mean, bear in mind this came out before the Jimmy Kimmel debacle, so it's sort of pre that bit. But I suppose it's essentially, about the fact that we were so quick when he came out, and I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who won't recognise this behaviour, but we all went online to try and find out who this killer was, and
Charlie Kirk,
and in the hope that he was on the other side, and therefore we would win the argument, and which sort of tells you all you need to know, really. But it's but pre now post Kimmel, it's sort of now this added layer of sort of the hypocrisy of kind of what happened there. But everyone, I suppose what's interesting as well, the left have spent the last decade sort of being very cancelly, and the right, and I've agreed with them on this, have been going, freedom of speech is really important, even for people to say nasty things you don't agree with. And the tables have suddenly shifted, and suddenly lefties that have been calling me out for being pro-free speech as some sort of right-wing useful idiot for the right, and now going, oh my God, no, free speech is really important because Jimmy Kimmel just got cancelled. And it's the right that are suddenly getting a bit cancelly and a bit pearl clutchy and a bit sensitive. It's kind of, it's, I really thought the right was right about this, but it turns out they're just as, they were just using it as a stick to beat us with rather than actually meaning it, because it doesn't matter what side of the fence you are. Free speech, it's such a trope, but it's worth repeating, is for not just people you like, but for people you fundamentally disagree with. It's so sort of obvious.
It's sort of tactical. That's what you realise. It's not all the left and all the right, but certainly large parts of the online left and online right. It's very tactical, and like the right. There's a part of the right that weren't actually against it. They were just like, oh, that looks like fun. I wish I could do that. I wish I could be the one doing the cancelling. And, I think you rightly as well in your video criticised Donald Trump's reaction, like his ability to bring it back to himself. Actually,
well, I think that's the point as well, is if you look at, say, for example, the reason Jimmy Kimmel got fired, and there are two or three reasons, things that he said that could have been the case. But the bit that I think got him into trouble is implying, well, pretty much explicitly saying that the killer is probably a MAGA Republican, right? And that's demonstrably not true. But so them trying to sort of cancel Jimmy for that and saying how appalling that was would hold a bit more truck if Donald Trump hadn't gone out like 10 minutes after Charlie Kirk's death, before the guy was in custody, before we knew who did it, blaming this on the far left. And also this idea that Jimmy Kimmel's been fired for lying on air, which again, you could kind of go, yeah, that does, he did definitely say that this killer is probably a MAGA Republican. But that again would hold some truck. If, how many times has Trump lied down the barrel of the camera live on television? So there's sort of that double standard hypocrisy,
Hey, one thing I did think was interesting was that you sort of laid in your video, like, the blame for some of what the right has become at the feet of the left. We were talking about hysterical reactions to
this cancel culture, this feeling that you can't say things that you feel, this idea that we've had certainly here, if you're thinking of voting Brexit, you must be a far right anti-immigration arsehole. Even if you do think that immigration is out of control and needs some serious changes in the way we approach it, that you must be a right-wing arsehole and pushing people kind of to the right in that regard. And the left have to take some responsibility for creating an atmosphere where you're either with us or you're against us. Both sides are to blame for that. But the left do have to take some responsibility for the death of discourse. The right have to take some responsibility for that as well. But, I think it's sort of, and also, the fact that Charlie Kirk got shot and a lot of, it's really difficult to take a sample of the morality of humanity by looking at Twitter because, but...
I mean, it's probably the worst place
It's the worst place to go. But a lot of people, really seriously having a hop and a skip over this guy that's dying. And then suddenly the worst thing in the world is... Because, let's be clear about this. A guy losing his nightly chat show because of things he said pales in comparison to a man losing his life because of things that we've said. And I think we do need a bit of perspective there. A guy was fucking shot just because I didn't agree with him. I like Jimmy Kimmel and I didn't like Charlie Kirk, but that doesn't mean that Charlie Kirk's death is far more horrific an act to a millionaire losing his thing.
The interesting thing, Tom, is that you're having to say things, right, that in a weird way, because of the febrile nature of discourse, sound radical and sound like a sort of philosophical shot across the bows. But it's fucking obvious. It's saying, like, the cancellation of a chat show, while bad, is not equivalent to a man getting shot in public for his views.
Yeah, I would add a caveat to that, though, is both of those incidents, one incalculably more horrific than the other, but both of those incidents do have far-reaching implications for the way discourse is dealt with, the way that people do kill people for things that they've said, but also the fact that the administration, which in his inauguration speech, Trump said, "I am going to bring back free speech into the public arena, specifically on television." He said it in his inauguration speech, and now they're putting pressure on, we will take away your license if you do not spend a lot more time kissing Trump's arse.
But there's just one thing I wanted to say about Trump. If people want to push back on the idea that he would weaponize this, in the vigil, right, that happened in this stadium over the weekend for Charlie Kirk, and it was quite a funny moment, but also instructive, is when he talks about Charlie Kirk, his attitude to the people that he disagrees with. It's quite revealing what he says. So we just play the clip now.
He was a missionary with a noble spirit and a great, great purpose. He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie. I hate my opponent. And I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry. I am sorry, Erica. But now Erica can talk to me and the whole group, and maybe they can convince me that that's not right, but I can't stand my opponent.
So, yeah, basically what he said is that Charlie always said, you should respect your opponents and want the best for them. And he's like, basically, no, I don't want that. I mean, he literally stands.
He says, I hate them. I hate my opponents, is what he said.
It's quite funny because you go, how the fuck do you fight against that when a bloke's willing to just go out and go, nah, not me, mate. Fucking
this was 24 hours, maybe 48 hours after Charlie Kirk's death. He was asked on a Fox News interview, how were you going to try and bring the country together after this? And he said, I couldn't care less. Well, you've sort of got to admire his balls there, but he doesn't care less. And that is frightening. And you could, in a way, say, look, it's 24, 48 hours after a colleague or a close friend or a close supporter of his has died. You can understand that he might be angry, but he's the president of the United States, for fuck's sake. It's like, and also the other thing that Jimmy Kimmel sort of did a joke about is he's asked, how are you holding up, Mr. President? You know, you've just lost a friend. Yeah, I'm doing really well because we're building a ballroom. You know, he just talks about building his ballroom. So, and you could argue that Jimmy Kimmel bringing that up is tasteless, but you go, but it's no more tasteless than what Donald Trump just actually did.
Just a couple more general points about left versus right. We are on slightly different sides of the divide. What do you think it's more fun to be? Is it more fun to be a left winger or a right winger? Because there's that phrase. Have you heard of this phrase? Protest with the left, party with the right. Have you heard of that one? You know, if there's ever in your mind,
that does make sense. I've seen it happen in my sort of 10 years of doing pie. 10 years yesterday since I put my first video out. I've lost my train of thought because I was talking about me. What did it seemed what happened was you started off celebrating something but then felt old and then got overtaken by a sense of ennui. What the fuck were we just talking about? I'm so sorry.
We were talking about whether or not it's more fun to be a lefty or a righty, and you party with the right, protest with the left.
In the 10 years that I've been doing this, it's definitely cooler to be right wing, and the kids are. It's because that prescribed liberal norm that was the culture war was won whilst we were losing elections left, right, and centre. The left were winning the culture war, and therefore it was far more rock and roll to be right wing. And now it's much more fun to be right wing because they seem to be, for want of a better phrase, winning the argument. I think the culture war is swinging back. It's not just politically, but the culture is swinging to the right. Much more fun to be, whereas it used to be, I'm sure, in like the 60s and 70s, it was much more cooler to be left wing.
You could pretend to be one of those hippie blokes pretending to be all cool, but actually secretly a massive alpha that just wanted to shag loads of women.
Yeah,
I still think they exist. I would say that it is becoming less fun to be on the right unless you're at the further ends of the right, because in its attempts to emulate the woke left, the right is now starting to cannibalize itself, where people can't have enough ideological purity. So I think that the era of the kind of banter era of the right, of having a laugh, I do think we're now in the death rattles of that.
Well, there is that thing of the woke right that I'm sure we could talk about. But what is interesting, when we both kind of fucking started, really, again, sort of 10 years ago, you've probably been doing it a bit longer than me. But I remember we did an interview together and it was like this, here's a right-wing comedian, here's a left-wing comedian, and you're right of centre, I'm left of centre. And that seemed like a big enough gap for that to become an potentially interesting article. We're essentially, we're seen by a lot of people as essentially the same because we're near the centre line, near that sort of area of reasonableness and sort of give and take. And that oddly seems extreme now, that we're sort of the fucking fence sitters, you fucking,
pound on each horse, is it? You're doing each way bet on the boat race, would you? Yeah, it's like that. You go, no, that's just how my brain works. It's sometimes I argue with myself, sometimes I feel differently, but then also like it is hilarious, like with people kind of like shooting past you on the Overton window. But yeah, well, you know a second ago how you suddenly felt a sense of ennui for feeling old. I'm just feeling a sense of ennui for realising that we've bit by bit become sort of centrist dads.